When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
This episode is brought to you by Indie Insights. Indie Insights is our bi-weekly newsletter and love note to the film industry, movies, and the creatives that make them, not to mention you, our esteemed listeners. Inside, you'll find curated industry trends, articles, exclusive commentary, and underappreciated films from filmmakers like you worldwide. And the best part is that it is completely free. So join today at www.bonsai.film. It takes just a few seconds. And once you sign up, you'll get the very next newsletter on Friday morning. It's that simple. Go to www.bonsai.film to get Indie Insights, our bi-weekly newsletter, and join a network of film creatives just like yourself. And don't worry, we'll never sell your information or spam you with a bunch of nonsense emails, just the bi-weekly film industry goodness you need. And if you ever tire of Indie Insights, simply unsubscribe. No gimmicks, no games. So go to www.bonsai.film to get Indie Insights for free. You're listening to Make It, a podcast by Bonsai Creative that helps creatives in film get where they're going faster by sharing the advice, knowledge, and insights of professional creatives across the film industry. I'm your host, Chris Barkley.
Hey there, I'm Mark Maxey. I'm a producer with Rolling Pictures. I'm the chairman of the Producers Guild of America's Capital Region. I'm a filmmaker and a storyteller, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today.
Mark Maxey, welcome to the Make It podcast. This is going to be, I think, a fan favorite because we have a man, and those in the audience listening, you will get a sense of this very shortly after I read through your bio, but we have a man with us today who has worked sort of across the spectrum in film from the production standpoint, and someone who can answer some of the probably your most burning questions as an audience in terms of how to get a movie made and why producers pick certain projects to be married to over others. So I could not be more excited, Mark, to have you on. I am going to read a short bio. Now, this is the internet, as I always say. So if something is wrong or needs to be amended to, feel free to jump in and amend to this piece here. Mark Maxey is an Emmy award-winning producer and executive vice president at Rolling Pictures, a motion picture company delivering development, packaging, financing, production, and editorial services for film and television. Maxey is a member of the Producers Guild of America, Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, and Documentary Producers Alliance. Maxey is a co-founder and chairman emeritus of the Washington West Film Festival, the only film festival to donate 100% of net box office proceeds to help an area of need in the community. Maxey serves on the boards of Women in Film and Video and the Rock and Roll for Children Foundation, benefiting families fighting pediatric cancer at the Children's Inn at the National Institutes of Health. He does have a forthcoming film with Kara Sedgwick. She, I believe, directed this. It has Kevin Bacon in it. It premieres, or it did premiere at Tribeca in New York. Another film with Dustin Hoffman and Candice Bergen as well. You've done, I think, 3 films this year. And I'm wondering how they're doing. I know you've been really busy this year, Mark. Is it correct you've done 3 productions this year so far? Are they all in post? Are any of them out?
So I had done 3 films last year, one of which has been released, one of which is coming out this fall, and one of which will be out this spring. So for the 3 films last year, As They Made Us was the film that was Mayim Bialik's directorial debut. That's the film that starred Dustin Hoffman and Candice Bergen, and that came out in April. So that's available now. It's on multiple streaming platforms. It's on Showtime. It's on all the the TVOD and most of those kind of video on demand platforms. So yeah, As They Made Us is available and it's doing well. It's got an 87, 81 on Rotten Tomatoes the last time I checked for audience and critic scores. So we're just thrilled that audiences are responding favorably to that story. It's a dramatic film. And again, as I mentioned, it's the first feature film directed by Mayim Bialik, who is perhaps better known as an actress from Blossom or Big Bang Theory, or now as one of the hosts of Jeopardy. But it's a very powerful and personal story of hers with some brilliant performances by not only Dustin Hoffman and Candice Bergen, but Simon Helberg and Diana Agron as well. So that's out now. The film that you had mentioned that premiered at Tribeca back in June is the Kara Sedgwick, Kevin Bacon film starring Alexander Shipp and Kyle Allen and Carrie Preston and Maddie Brewer. Also Simon Helberg. I did a couple of things with him last year. So that premiered in June and it'll be out this fall. And then the other film that we did last year that I was part of was directed and written by Katie Holmes and starred Katie and Alan Cumming and Derek Luke. It's a film called Rare Objects, and that'll be out in the spring of next year from IFC. So.
Got it. And the Kara Sedgwick one is called Space Oddity, correct?
Correct. Yeah, Space Oddity. Thank you. Yeah. And then this year we're on track to do another 3 films. So we shot a film in June that's in post now. We're prepping for a film that we'll be doing this fall, and then we have our 3rd feature we'll be shooting over the winter. So and then several more projects in development. I mean, it's just always busy as you know. So yeah. Yeah.
In the words of Jenica Schwartzman, you are a moving train. That is to be said without question, for sure. And I did notice that Rotten Tomato score. The 87, which is essentially equates to an 8.7, let's say on IMDb. That's really even more impressive because in our films, the one thing you can't trust is the user. And I don't mean that in the sense of the audience that watches it. We love the audiences that choose to watch our films. It's amazing. But their sort of judgment on how to score something is wildly diverse. So if somebody just barely kind of like isn't jiving with the movie, instead of it being a 6, it's a 2 or a 1. And if somebody loves the movie, instead of it being an 8, it's a 10. It's suddenly like the next Godfather. And so it's really difficult to like predict or map what a user will score your film. So to have what equates to an 8.7 is brilliant. And I think Mayim Bialik her brand now is just being a super intellectual, and her brand is kind of just being the resident genius in the room, which maybe we'll talk about what it's like to be in the room with her down the line here. But I want to start in a really fun place, and we'll kind of bounce around as we do on the Make It podcast and go into many different worlds. But I'd love to start with who is Snuffy Walden, and why was his story important to you?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. I mean, Snuffy is, first and foremost, a dear friend. Full disclosure, he's also my partner in Rolling Pictures, our production company. He's someone that I had met years ago at a film festival that I was part of. We became friends, and the more I got to know his story and his creativity and his genius as a musician and a composer, the more I was compelled to share that with a wider audience. So that was kind of the genesis of the film that became Up to Snuff. It was actually Aaron Sorkin, who Snuffy had worked with on a number of television shows. Snuffy did all the music for The West Wing and for Studio 60 and for Sports Night, which were 3 of Aaron Sorkin's 4 television series. Snuffy had also done music for a lot of other series, The Wonder Years and 30-something, Friday Night Lights, Nashville, and on and on. He's had just really prolific career as a composer. But it was Aaron who gave me the idea to actually make a movie about Snuffy. When Aaron was doing his series called The Newsroom for HBO, and
loved
was
it.
filming that. And I had taken my wife, and we were in the studio for an episode of that. And Aaron Sorkin sat down next to us, and I had not met him before, but he was very friendly. And when I mentioned that we were friends of Snuffy Walden's, he just lit up and started telling me stories about Snuffy. And that was kind of the light bulb moment for me, that if Aaron Sorkin reacts that way when you mention Snuffy's name, wouldn't it be fun to go talk to other people that have known Snuffy Walden throughout his career and get their stories? And so that was kind of the genesis for what became Up to Snuff, the documentary feature film. Just a fascinating guy, a big heart. He's, the world's a better place because he's in it. And that was really just a labor of love for me. And I'm, thrilled that anyone else likes it. But even if no one else ever saw that movie, that was a story that I wanted to tell. So,
yeah, it's a great story for anybody wanting to, or that you sort of exists in the creative field or wants to create film. But it's also really wonderful for those of us. I'm one of them. Mark, you're one of them. Your parents as well. People who play music. Just this idea that here's a guy who had such tremendous success without knowing how to read or write music. I can certainly relate to that because I took 2 months of piano lessons, and from there learned to play by ear. And just by listening, they used to do, I don't know if they still do this, Mark, maybe I'm old. But on the radio, they used to always play a top 7 or a top 10 and whatever. And I would, on my cassette deck, I would record that the countdown, because a lot of times I'd have to be in bed and like I had school the next day or whatever. So you'd record it on the tape deck. You'd have it ready for the morning, and then I could replay that the next day, listen to all the popular songs, and in full transparency, Mark, I would learn to play the songs, and then I would take them to school. And instead of going to lunch, I would play piano for girls, basically. in the choir room, and it was cool because I was playing like my own little acoustic melody of the top 7 or the best songs around, and because they were mostly pop songs, a lot of them were just 3 or 4 chords, but I mean really pretty chords and really great progressions, but pretty simple, and you could play around with it and really sort of expand upon those 4 chords in a variety of ways. So. Yeah, I relate to Snuffy quite a bit. You're on the record. I have a quote from you. Doing a documentary about a person who is still alive, especially someone who is a friend, requires a lot of trust. And it's really true. I just was invited to a screening of the Marvin Sapp documentary, and I watched it at the African American Museum here in Nashville. It's a great place. and or I think African American Music Museum, right there on Broadway. And watching it right away, you know the music's going to be great because it's Marvin Sapp, but the movie was executive produced by someone who works for Marvin Sapp. And therefore, I thought that there was no risk whatsoever taken in terms of conflicts in his life, how he overcame them. You know, he was never the bad guy, really. It was a bad guy in a saccharine sort of false way. And I think it really hurt the movie. The movie's going to do well in black churches, but I think it could have been theatrically good had he had someone independent do the documentary. So I preface that, come back to you and say, how in the world were you able to do this documentary in a fair way with Snuffy being so close to you?
Yeah, that's a great and very insightful question, actually. And that's why I did take a lot of trust, because Snuffy had no say or control over what was in the film. And I wanted this to be a very honest look. And for the people that haven't seen it, this isn't just a story of a prolific musician or composer, but it's also a story of redemption. I mean, Snuffy in the 70s was touring with Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Shaka Khan and Eric Burdon and the Animals, and was living a lifestyle of success and excess that was so prevalent in the music industry in the 70s. So as a touring musician, there's a lot of negative behavior that goes along with life on the road in that era. And Snuffy embraced and enjoyed all of those things. And then reached a point in his life where he realized that he was on a pretty self-destructive path and he needed to get sober. And in doing so, also realized he couldn't go back out on the road as a touring musician because he'd fall right back into the habits that he was trying to break. So he kind of had to reinvent himself. And that's where this guy who didn't know how to read or write music kind of reinvented himself as a composer for television, first with the show 30-something and then with the show Wonder Years, which both ended up being huge hits. And that kind of launched his career in television. But because this is a story of redemption and of someone who is dealing with these substance abuse issues and alcoholism and coming through that and reinventing themselves and redeeming themselves and then giving back, which is kind of the third act of his story, is he's really dedicated himself to helping elevate people around him, which is just such a beautiful thing. He's all about how he could be of service to others. So, and that's a theme in his story and in the film. So, tackling all that, I didn't want this to be sugar-coated or whitewashed. I wanted to talk to people that knew Snuffy when he was a drunk and when he was abusing drugs and when he was a touring musician. And then we talked with people like Martin Sheen or Aaron Sorkin that knew him as this proper, sweet, sober, brilliant composer. And through all of those stories, we kind of reveal who he is. We talked to his friends and his family as well as the work colleagues throughout his career. So we do try to provide a very well-rounded view, but that also did take a lot of trust because Snuffy never saw the film until we had a cut together, and then he sat next to me the first time he watched it on a big screen in a theater full of people with his fingers digging into my knee, grimacing at certain things that maybe were less than flattering, but very honest. And I think that's ultimately what makes his story so powerful, because it is an honest look at him, both the positive and the negative, and the genius and the demons that contributed to that genius. So it was just a really, really fun journey to take, and I'm very proud of who he is and grateful that he's a part of my life in any way. So.
And you can see Up to Snuff on Tubi for sure, but there's other places, Amazon, right?
On Amazon, it's on Apple TV, it's on Tubi, Zubi, it's in a bunch of places. So Google Up to Snuff and you'll find it.
Yeah, everybody should do that. It's a great doc. And this was a bit of a departure for you. You're normally a producer. I'm wondering how your producing chops or your experience in television in the past prepared you for your directorial debut here.
Yeah, so it's kind of evolved. I started, managing a production company and, telling other people's stories. So I did that for almost 20 years. We had warehouses full of gear and edit suites and, grip and electric and camera and all the stuff you need to go, produce television or film or videos. And that's what I did. So, which is great. And I loved the work that I did, and I loved the people that I worked with and the stories that we told for the clients that brought us in. But again, we're always telling someone else's story. And so with Up to Snuff and the films I've done since, it's really been kind of a pivot on my part, somewhat intentionally, to tell the stories that I want to tell and do the things that are more creative. So with Up to Snuff and with the films that have followed, those have all been stories that I found or projects that I've been brought into that I believed in and was excited about. And now when I get up in the morning, the things I'm working on today and tomorrow are the things that are Rolling Pictures productions that are the stories I'm passionate about sharing with the world, and not just someone else's story that they've hired us to help them tell to their audience. So it's a very different approach to the work. And I'm at a stage in my life where my kids are growing, I'm middle-aged, I've been there, done that. And now I'm really just looking at the next, 10, 20 years, thinking, how do I want to spend that time? And I really want to do it on things that are meaningful to me. So.
Yeah, it's beautifully put. And we definitely are going to touch on some of the different ways you do that, because you do it in a variety of ways. But if you will allow me, I'd love to jump back in time to that time where you were where you hadn't been there and done that yet. And I want to talk about growing up with Linda and Larry. Your parents are remarkable musicians, orchestra level, internationally acclaimed musicians. Your mother especially, or maybe I shouldn't say especially, but your mother's been really awarded and is revered. How was growing up in a household of sort of orchestra level musicians different in your mind than growing up in maybe the normal or more normal households or typical households you saw your friends grow up in?
Sure. Well, the fact that both my parents are classical musicians, I think really enhanced the environment in which I grew up. Music was always in the house, and we were always going to concerts. My parents were always practicing. Their friends were often other musicians or music faculty at the university. My dad, in addition to being a clarinetist, taught music at the University of Kansas. And before that, I was born in Los Angeles, and he was teaching in Long Beach, which is where I was originally born. My mom is a concert marimbist and was with Columbia Artist Management and toured all over and played Carnegie Hall and Madison Square Garden and concerts all over the world in between. Yeah. So, the fact that they were both musicians and were surrounded by other musicians, and also the fact that I grew up in a college town. There's a lot of arts and music and culture and education and sports, and it was just a great place to be, which I think made my childhood more interesting. The other thing about where I grew up is that across the street, catty corner from the little residential street where we lived, was a television or a film studio, rather. Centron Studios made industrial and educational films. So they had sound stages and edit suites, and this is back in the 60s and 70s when an edit suite was reel-to-reel films and people actually splicing and taping,
right? Yeah,
taped together. So
cutting celluloid.
Yeah, I mean it was absolutely film. So having grown up there, we'd play in there. They'd let us come in and help us to craft services. We'd ride our bikes in their parking lot. We'd be, my sister and friends and I would be extras in some of the educational films that they did when they needed and when they had roles for kids. So I became aware of that, the magic of filmmaking and the magic of storytelling and how those pieces are created and assembled and put together, how the music and the sound effects are recorded on different tracks and the dialogue and how that's all run through a machine by an editor who splices and times things up and makes things happen, how they did some of the special effects for things. So I was exposed to that at a young age, and And I don't know that that had a direct impact on my future career, but there was certainly an awareness and appreciation for the creative side of the visual arts and storytelling in particular. So not only was I surrounded by music, but I also had this kind of, this visual element as well, which I think all, shaped perhaps who I ended up becoming and the things that I've done since. So.
When a man owns a widget corporation and he passes away, what you will typically find in his will is that his son or daughter will then own the widget factory. So how did you avoid maybe, I don't know if it was a potential self-inflicted pressure or real pressure to be a concert musician? How did you skip over that and go into film and get sort of your parents' approval to do it early on?
Yeah, well, so to my parents' credit, with both of them being professional musicians, the last thing that they wanted for either of their children was to be a professional musician. So I played violin and piano and then rebelled and played guitar and keyboards in the cover band, which they thought was just noise. They were always supportive of finding your own path, and I'm fortunate that I've been able to do that. So
I do have to ask you why, Mark. Why did your parents want to steer you away from being a professional musician?
Yeah, well, I think because it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of time, and it's not always easy. I mean, they both practiced hours every day. I mean, I hated practicing the piano at 30 minutes a day, which is what they asked of us when we were kids, but or the violin, you had to do 30 minutes a day. They'd spend hours practicing and rehearsing and then performing, and in my mom's case, touring. I mean, she was gone 6 months out of the year on the road performing. It's a very different life and takes a lot of discipline and a lot of time and is a lot of work. And I think they didn't want their decision to pursue that to influence my sister or I unnecessarily. They didn't want us to feel pressure like, well, this is what we should do because this is what they chose to do.
This is the family trade sort of thing.
Yeah. And so they were, very much, I think to the opposite side, very supportive of, find what you're passionate about and follow the fun for you, which may be different than what they chose for themselves. So I'm very grateful for the environment in which I grew up and the opportunities that I had. And I'm glad that I found, something that I'm passionate about. So.
Yeah. Music has to be a choice. That's been my experience. I had two piano players I grew up with. One guy's name is Andrew Johnson. And the other guy, his name was Rashad, but I'm forgetting his last name now. It's been decades. So both were equally talented. One played jazz piano. That was Andrew. Another one played classical. And Andrew won Grammy runner-up, which was unheard of because, this is in a small town in Tennessee. And how did they even find him? But he was brilliant and he was a showman. He did just his mannerisms behind playing the piano were fun and entertaining to watch. And he had an ego about it, almost a toxic ego about it, where if someone else was playing and he wasn't playing, he was like, why are you letting him play instead of me? And whereas Rashad, his mother, under threat of what seemed to be violence, forced him to practice every day. And he was tremendous and he was great, but he was tight. I mean, really tight, really straight up and down and no theatrics whatsoever, no joy, no heart in it. Just I'm playing these notes, almost like a player piano. And I've kept that with me. One guy practiced 3 hours a day because he wanted to, fed his ego, helped him in other areas of social life. And then the other guy was forced to do it. And I'm sure the second he could convince himself to quit, he will. And it's one of those things. I practiced because it was doing something for me. And I knew a lot of people who were forced to take lessons, and then as soon as they could get out of it, they got out of it. So I think you're dead. The whole trick is, if you're a parent out there listening to this, maybe the whole trick is just getting your kids to think they chose it. Almost like, I'm lame, Mark. I took a parenting class when I first had my oldest, who is now 22, but in the class they taught, how to get kids to agree to things they wouldn't normally agree to. And so one of the tricks is to offer up 3 things you want them to eat and let them choose which one or 2 they're going to have, so that the power is always in their hand. You do it really young. Hey, so what would you like? Brussels sprouts, broccoli, or black beans? Oh, I guess I'll do black beans. Okay, well, it's your choice. And maybe that's how you get kids to take on some creative art they don't necessarily want to take on, Mark.
Could be. Also, I think it's recognizing where your gifts are. Everyone has different gifts, and yes. I know enough really good musicians to realize that I'm not a musician. I can play the piano a little bit, I can play a little guitar, I play a little violin, but I wouldn't say I'm a musician. In the same way, I can change my own oil on my car, but I'm not an auto mechanic. Just because I can do it doesn't mean I should do it or shouldn't make a career out of doing it. And I feel that with music, as I've seen so many people who are just truly gifted musicians, I'm realizing that that was not my gift, and I'm happy to have found something that I am equally passionate about. I would have loved to have been a rock star when I was a kid. Don't get me wrong. If I could have been Eddie Van Halen, that would have been, my career path when I was in high school. But I lacked the gift or the talent. I was not Eddie Van Halen on the guitar, and here I am, and I'm happy to have found my way. So,
in that same vein of knowing what you should do and shouldn't do, not what you can and can't do, do you think some of the things Robert Rodriguez has said over the last decade are helpful or hurtful to emerging filmmakers? And to contextualize it, he is known for doing everything. He's the director, he's the producer, he lights it, he gaffs it, he writes it, he's doing the score, he's in post. And I've seen a lot of independent filmmakers that look at that as inspiration and say, I'll do all of it. Even if maybe they shouldn't be doing all of it. Maybe their focus should be in one area or the other. What is your opinion on this?
One of the things I love about film is that it's such a collaborative medium. I love putting together a team of really talented people to make magic happen, to take words on a page or a blank sheet of paper and turn it into something beautiful or emotional or impactful or something. So I think, and while that's great for him that he has those talents, he can do all those things himself. For me personally, I think that would make the experience less fulfilling, because I really enjoy the collaboration with other people. I'm on calls with production designers and art directors and directors and, the camera people and the lighting people and, all the creative people that have input on, what it is that we're going to do and how it's going to look. And then on the editorial side, after you filmed it, then working with the editorial team and the editors and the graphics folks and, all the other visual artists that come in to help make it, to polish it and put it together. I love that part. And that's one of the things I love about being a producer. People often, I think don't quite understand what a producer does. They know what a director does. They know what an actor does. They know what a makeup person or a lighting person does, but they don't always understand what a producer does. But, the producer is, I think everyone else involved in a film has their lane and the piece of the story that they're part of. So the director and the camera people and the makeup people are all there for the production, and the editor and the composer and the colorist and all those people are there for the post-production. And there's a writing team and a creative team that were there before production started. And, there's other people involved after editing's complete for film festivals or distribution or whatever's to follow. The producer is the one person that's there from the beginning to the end. I'll see a story and acquire the rights to the story, or I'll find a screenplay and acquire the rights to the screenplay. And then, I'll work to get a director attached, and we'll work to get cast attached, and then we'll, scout locations and choose where we're going to film it. We'll build out our team for all the different department heads that are going to help us, fill in the crew to tell the story. We'll go edit it. We'll finish it. We'll take it on the festivals, and then we'll sell it to a distributor, hopefully, and it's released, for audiences to enjoy around the world. And the producer's there from beginning to end, and that's one of the things that I love. And each one of those phases is different. The logistics you're doing when you're prepping and scheduling and packaging is very different than the logistics or conversations you're having when you're in production, which is very different than the editorial, which is very different than what follows. So, and I love all of it, and I want to be there for all of it, and I want to be present. I'm one of those producers that I want to be there when the first camera shot is up, and when we're wrapping on the last day of production. I mean, I'm not someone who likes to just go let it happen and watch people do it. I like to actually be present and be part of it, because I love that collaboration. So, to me, trying to do everything myself, it sounds horrible. Because I think that it's better. I think that the work is better for all the creative input. The conversations that we have in pre-production or during production or in post-production, where I'm debating things with an editor or with the director or with another creative part of the team, and we're trying to work through the right answer to a line or a scene or a shot or a decision. I think having multiple people weighing in and sharing their different viewpoints enables us to get to a place that's perhaps better than if I just come in and said, this is how it's going to be, and we're just going to do it my way, and that's it. I'd like to say that if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. I love surrounding myself with really talented people who are better than me, and I think ultimately that collaboration makes the work better. So,
yeah, man of my own heart for sure. I love being on the ground with the people. One thing I had to learn was you can. Even if you're on set, be engaged. I used to have this idea that it was valuable to be on set, but to let the creatives create. I still have that belief, but it's not so polar. It's not all the way like let the creators create. What I've found is they need your input. They appreciate your input. You're there for a reason. They want to work with you for a reason. So bring something valuable that only you can bring, to that engagement. We are similar in a few other ways too. Me and you like to use our time to hop on boards and make changes in the community, and we're both philanthropically minded. You volunteer on at least 4 boards: the Washington West International Film Festival, Women in Film and Video, the Artistic Fuel Foundation, and the Rock and Roll for Children Foundation. What's your goal with these, with this time and this volunteering, and why did you choose these particular, philanthropic endeavors or boards to hop on? Why these organizations in particular?
Sure. Well, I think I got this from my parents as well as the people I'm surrounded by, like Snuffy. But I'm a big believer in service and service to others and giving back. I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunities I've had, and so I'm all about trying to make the world a better place in whatever small way I can do that. So the organizations that I've chosen to be part of or volunteer for or join the boards of, all fit into that somehow. So the Rock and Roll for Children Foundation helps families who are dealing with pediatric cancer, which, I'm a parent, and, I'm so grateful for my 2 sons. And I can't imagine if one of them as a child were stricken with leukemia or something, and we ended up spending months at a time living in a hospital out of state somewhere while they're in treatment. And so that's such a horrific experience. And so the Children's Inn, for whom we raise funds, provides an environment that's more like a hotel than a hospital for the families that are usually there for an extended stay. And it provides some normalcy and kind of a break from the doctors and the nurses and the medical part of the treatment, and provides more of a fun home-like environment for these families and these kids. It's really just such a huge benefit to these families that are dealing with such bigger things. So that's an organization that I'm thrilled to be part of, and it's also fun. I also believe in following the fun. So, one of the ways we raise funds is we organize a big rock concert, and Snuffy and other musicians that we know. We'll have John Popper from Blues Traveler and Simon Kirk from Bad Company, and Ann Wilson, and all these people all come in and put on a big celebrity-filled concert to raise money, and it's just a fun thing to do. So, and then with the film festival, Washington West, it's a film festival, so it ties into the visual arts, which I love. But it's as you said in the introduction, it's the only film festival to give 100% of its box office proceeds to charity, and in a very specific way. This isn't just to present a big oversized check to some generic charity, but this is in a very targeted way, solving an area of need somewhere in the community, or for someone who's at risk or at need. And then we actually create a short film that plays before every screening of the next year's film festival, so audiences can see the impact that they had just by buying their ticket and participating in Washington West.
It's a beautiful idea.
Yeah, and the tagline there is "Story can change the world," and we believe that through the visual arts, you can make the world a better place. That's such a wonderful organization to be part of, and the work that they do. And then with Artistic Fuel Foundation, same kind of a thing. It's a foundation that was established by one of my dear friends and partners who wanted to give back and find a way to help lift up artists. So the Artistic Fuel, it's literally what it says. It's to provide fuel for artists, whether it's a painter or a sculptor or a musician or a filmmaker or an author, whatever your art is. They provide programs and education and mentoring and grants to provide assistance and support for whatever those needs are to help elevate artists. It's just such a wonderful thing. I think art is such an important part of what makes the world a rich and wonderful place to be. And so for what Artistic Fuel is doing to try to help support the artistic community, I think is worthwhile and worthy of support. And then with Women in Film and Video, it's their whole mission is helping perhaps underrepresented voices in the film industry have a voice. And right. So it's women or minorities or indigenous people or people of color or whoever it is. Women in Film is a very inclusive organization that's all about trying to help elevate people in the visual arts. And so I'm very proud to be on the board of the DC Women in Film. And it's just a wonderful organization. So yeah, all of these things, I guess what they have in common is they all have something to do with arts or giving back. Even the Children's NIH event is kind of driven by a music event. So whether it's music or film or arts, all of the organizations on whose boards I serve have something to do with art in some way.
I think Nick should pursue what it would take to get on the board of the DC Women in Film and Video. I think he would be a wonderful asset, super passionate. My co-founder, Nick, who lives in Gaithersburg, but would probably do a lot of things in DC in the film community and tries to and does. So, yeah, something for me to think about. I know that you said story can change the world. That's the credo. Is there a story that comes to mind for you that changed the world in your eyes?
That's there's so many, and some are, and I guess that's what I love about film. They can make you feel a certain way or see things differently than you had thought. I know someone that watched a documentary film around the power of veganism and decided to become a vegan because they wanted to see if they could achieve the same benefits that were represented in that film. I know people that have seen films, whether it's a documentary or a feature film, on a particular subject matter. And it could be something from, issues around disparities for people of color to something about women's rights to something about science or music or space or whatever, where it's inspired them to make a change or view things in a different way or have compassion for an area of need in the world that perhaps they didn't understand before. Across social issues or racial issues or women's issues or any issues. I think there's just so many ways that, they say a picture speaks louder than 1,000 words. And I think that's, oftentimes possible, where just showing someone a story or a side of things or a point of view that maybe is different than their own experience or perspective helps enrich their understanding of the world around them and the people in the lives that others are leading in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise. So,
yeah, I completely agree. I think film does that better than almost any other storytelling medium. And one thing that we talk about in some of our consults around branding and marketing is this hierarchy of sort of engagement and influence. So if you have something written out in text, let's say a blog post, that's going to get a certain level of engagement. But if you add audio to that text somehow, then you've gone up an order of magnitude in engagement right away. And statistics, show this. If you add video to it, you go one more level up, one more order of magnitude up. So this combination of text, audio, and video. Well, film does something even better. It goes text, audio, video, music. All right. So it's not just you're hearing someone speak, but then you're feeling how they speak. And that's why I think it's the best storytelling medium that we know of as humans. Plus, we're just anthropologically sort of geared to tell and hear stories, which is, by the way, why I loved your comment on collaboration. Yeah, you can do it all in a vacuum yourself, but you get no stories out of it. One of the things we love is, okay, what was it like being on set with so-and-so? Tell us the story of that. Well, if you're doing it all yourself, you're not collaborating. You don't end up with any stories, and it's so, I don't know. I'm with you. It's unfulfilling. You mentioned a few times that you are the executive vice president of Rolling Pictures. You guys are rolling, pardon the terrible pun, and you've been super busy in the last couple of years. What are you doing differently? What are you doing that makes you guys stand apart from other production companies?
I don't know that we're doing anything different than anyone else, other than, for us, we're focused on the stories that we want to tell. So, there are some producers or production companies that have a very specific, kind of niche or genre. If you see a Blumhouse film, you know what it's going to be. If you see a Quentin Tarantino film, it has a very specific style to it. You know what you're going to get with Tarantino. With Rolling Pictures, we don't really have a specific point of view like that. We're looking for really impactful stories and really incredible characters. So if you look at the different films we've been part of, they're each kind of very different. We have a drama, we have a romantic comedy, we have a period piece, we have a documentary. Each is very different than the other. But they all have very compelling characters. They're all what I consider kind of prestige stories. We're looking to make the kind of stories that my parents and my kids would enjoy, which is perhaps different than the people making Sharknado 6. Not that Sharknado 6 was a great movie, and not that people didn't love it, and I'm sure it made the people involved a ton of money, and it was a lot of fun to do, but that's not the type of film that we're going for with Rolling Pictures. For better or worse, that's not a judgment. It's just a choice on our part. So, we're definitely looking for compelling stories and compelling characters that also fit within our lane. I mean, I'm not making Fast and Furious either, and I'm not looking for car chases and big budgets. I'm not going to make a $50 million film. The stuff we do skews on the under $10 million range, and I think there's a nice space there where we can we can tell good stories with good people. And if you look at the people who have been in the films that Rolling Pictures has been part of, Dustin Hoffman, Kevin Bacon, Kira Sedgwick, Katie Holmes. I mean, these are A-list people who are part of these productions. So I think that also says a lot about the stories that are chosen or the films that we've been part of. These films are films that attracts actors of that caliber, directors of that caliber, and that's one of the things we look for as well. So.
I love it. And speaking of Sharknado, the guy who writes that stuff, his name is Thunder. Believe it or not, it's his first name. And we've been on a few calls with Thunder. He's a sweet man, and he is 100% aware that he is winking at everybody with these movies. The movie that he was pitching us was a pirate zombie musical. And the script wasn't bad at all. But it was, it was preposterous, like purposely. And Thunder Levin, I think is his name. Cool dude. And he is aware that he is messing with you with the stuff that he writes. Speaking of scripts, how do you guys at Rolling Pictures assess a script? What are you looking for when you get a script?
Yeah, boy, and that's a great question as well. I mean, we get a lot of material to look at, and like most production companies, we actually don't accept unsolicited material, and yet we still end up with a large pile of stuff that actually is provided for us to read. So I have someone who does coverage for Rolling Pictures. That's his whole job, is to read scripts and do an assessment of whether or not it's worth the time for us. I don't have time to read 120 pages every time someone says, "Oh, here's a script you should read." I mean, I don't. And with the work that we're doing and all the production that's ongoing, it's hard to be thinking that far ahead. And we're putting slates together for next year and the year after and the year after, kind of in a rolling 3-year track. So we're constantly looking at new stories, but I have a team that helps weed that out. So we'll have coverage done that'll help determine whether or not this has merit and is worthy of the time to read or not. And then it either moves up the pile or down the pile, and eventually we'll get to it and then try to see where it fits. I mentioned that one of the films that we're developing is a period piece set in the 1800s. And, if we had 3 other films that were similarly period pieces, we'd make a decision or try to space them out so we don't end up with a slate of 4 films in the same year that are all very similar. So if you look at the films we're doing this year, there's kind of a comedic horror thing, which is a little different. We haven't really done a lot of horror. There's so many people that's all they do is horror, that I feel like that's not a market that's screaming out for necessarily our attention. But I did find a script that I love, that I think will be fun. We have a terrific cast, an amazing director that I think can do a good job with it for that type of genre piece that it is. We have a coming of age story that was written by Sherry O'Terry from Saturday Night Live. That's just sweet, funny, charming, from a teen girl perspective, going into high school and dealing with all the angst and it would have been a John Hughes film, in the 80s. I mean, it's that type of a story, which is very different. We have another film that's an amazing story that's based on an attorney who took on it's kind of a David versus Goliath story. I don't want to say too much, but I mean, it's about a real person who did something remarkable and accomplished something that no one else has accomplished.
Those are always great stories. And, we do something similar. We have 2 readers, but we set up a template for criteria because we don't charge for the coverage, and the coverage never goes outside of our walls, so to speak. So it's really just for us internally to assess. And then the way we do it is there's a score, there's a cumulative score that a script has to get before we will read it or engage with it. So if it just doesn't meet, and it's not perfect, right? Because these are 2 people that could be wrong, but if it doesn't reach that threshold, then like you said, we just don't have time to entertain it. And a lot of times really good is just really good. Like everybody can recognize it. And so I'm curious, our cumulative score is a 0 to 50 score, where each section you can rate 1 to 10. And I instruct my readers never to score anything a 7, because that's a bailout. I learned that early when I was writing scripts, is that anytime you paid for coverage, quote unquote, Hollywood coverage, you would always get a 7. It's a bailout number. You're not bad. You're not great. Here's a 7. And so we avoid 7s, and we force our readers to make the tough decision between, are you leaning that this is really good, like an 8, or needs some work, like a 6? Like, make the call. We really need you to make a call. And in that vein, do you guys have a similar scoring system before it can reach your desk? And what,
we do.
What is it?
Yeah, there's a rubric, and I don't want to get into the math, but it's basically a rubric that breaks it down by the different components, and whether it's plot or characters or story or pacing or all the other factors that are considered there, that all is scored, and then there's normally an analysis of the character, an analysis of the plot, and any questions that are left unanswered at the end, and that's a great coverage is a great tool for writers as well. I think that's a gift I don't have. I wish I could write. I'm always looking for good, compelling stories because I have no creative ideas of my own. That's my curse, that I'm just not bursting with these incredible scenarios and characters and scenes, unfortunately. So I love reading, what other people have written. I just want to spend my time focused on things that fit well with the types of stories we're looking for and are production ready and doable. That's one of the other things I think, and it's easy for me who's not a writer to criticize, but I think a lot of writers are so into what they're writing, they don't think about it in terms of what's achievable. And when you have a script that within the first 10 pages has introduced, 30 different locations and 300 different extras. It's not production ready. It's just not feasible to, at least for a company like Rolling Pictures to shoot that out in a reasonable schedule with a reasonable budget. So I think some of the more powerful things that we gravitate towards are things that are maybe a little more production ready, where it's a reasonable number of locations and characters and setups, where it's a compelling story that could be told within, the budgets and parameters that we generally have found we could be successful at. So
my baseline script for these coverages is Michael Clayton by Tony Gilroy. Do you have a baseline script where you basically train your readers to say, this is what I think excellent equals?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a single script I point to, but that's actually a good idea. The people that do coverage for us, kind of understand what we like and where we live and what we've been successful with. And so they tend to view things with that through that kind of a lens. So
I love it. Love to stick on this topic just a little bit. It's a rapidly changing world. There's software for everything from call sheets to production schedules. In your mind, how has technology sort of changed what a producer does, what your work is day to day? And if you had to tell an up-and-coming producer what skills to acquire in today's world, what would you tell him to learn to be an excellent producer?
Yeah, gosh, I don't know what to say to be an excellent producer. I know that what's helped me is certainly an understanding of how to build a budget. Every budget that I do is in Movie Magic budgeting. Every schedule I do is in Movie Magic scheduling. It's an industry standard for a reason. There's a lot of other software options out there that are all great or perhaps better, but for better or worse, that product from Entertainment Partners seems to be the standard that's used by the industry. And And understanding that, I think, has been very helpful for me. It's important to surround yourself with really good people. So have a good line producer, have a good UPM, have all the good pieces that you need on that team. But I found for me it's helpful even in advance of that, before I get to the point where I'm standing up a payroll and bringing on board a line producer or UPM. If I can go through and break down a script and put together a basic budget, even just as I'm packaging the financing, it helps me validate that the plan I'm putting together is reasonable. When people come to me and say, I want to make this movie and I need $10 million. And I say, well, how did you come up with $10 million? Or worse, they'll come and say, you'll say, what's the budget? They'll say, oh, it's $5 to $10 million. Well, if you are off by as much as $5 million, that just tells me you haven't done the work to know what you're talking about. So, when I go to someone and say, hey, I'm looking for money for a film, I can give you a specific number and I can back that up with a detailed budget that says, here's how I arrived at that number. And sure, there's going to be variables. And hey, if you can get George Clooney to be in your movie, maybe your budget will go up because he'll cost more than who you had budgeted. But those above the line costs are easy to adjust, based on changes in your cast. The cost to make the movie should still be what it costs to make the movie. It's still going to take this number of crew for this many days and these locations with this gear and these other factors. And regardless of what happens above the line, the below the line cost should be fairly consistent from when you first break it down to whenever you get to a final, locked schedule and budget. So I think understanding that has helped me as a producer. I know people that are always having to hire someone else to do that for them. And I think it makes it harder in some cases for them, especially in the early stages of development, when you don't have the financing, you don't have the budget, you don't have your payroll set up, and it's all coming out of your pocket as a producer. I think that's a huge skill.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's the UPM part is not to be underrated as well. So those are all really valuable points. I'm curious what your mindset is, or how you approach TV production differently versus film production.
Yeah, and I should say that for the television projects I've done, I'm not doing episodic series. I know people that do, and that's a whole skill set unto itself. Mm-hmm. The television things I've done have been more, a one-off special for, that was on PBS on Christmas Eve with Marvin Hamlish and the National Symphony, or it's a story in American Heroes that aired on Discovery's Military Channel for Veterans Day or Memorial Day or something. So, my TV work has been very specific, unscripted, 1 to 2 hour type of programs that are one-offs, which is very different than a scripted series or even an unscripted series or
gotcha.
TV. Yeah. So it's a very different approach. Although just because it's unscripted doesn't mean it's unstructured. I mean, you still know the story that you're going to tell, and I'm very proud of those types of productions that I've been part of. We really told some amazing stories. But I wouldn't say that I was a TV guy, because I know so many people who a friend of mine produces, Fantasy Island for Fox, or
right.
Is doing Black Family Mafia, with Snoop Dogg, and that's not the kind of TV producer I am. So,
right.
It's my experience is a little different.
It's like show running / producing almost with those other two.
Absolutely. Where, in my world, the executive producer is normally someone who's writing a check to fund a film. In the episodic television world, the executive producer is the showrunner and head writer who's running the writer's room. It's the same term, but completely different mean.
Absolutely.
And a different role in production. So,
yeah, you nailed it completely. I wasn't doubting that you would, by the way. In my life in music, a great producer could hear a piece of music. And if you didn't know this about me, Mark, I was in music before film. They could hear a piece of music and say, ooh, they should have done this, or that should be stripped away. They can hear little things that the layperson isn't hearing or considering. Are you like that with films in production? Can you watch a film and tell whether a producer was great at their job or not? Can you pull out little things? And what are those things?
Yeah, I can. I know that, well, there's a saying that I love that, which I think is true, that that art is never completed; it's abandoned. An artist, whether you're a musician or a painter or a filmmaker, there's always something else you would change. If you have enough time, you could spend 10 years on that painting or 10 years on that film or 10 years writing that book. And at a certain point, you just have to walk away and put your hands up and say, it is what it is, and it's done. But by the same token, when I watch even the things I've done, like To Snuff that we talked about, there's things in that I would still change. If I had had more time, if I'd had another year, if I'd had another $1 million, I'd still be making changes to that story. Snuffy feels that way with music. He's never watched The West Wing. He's never watched any of the shows that he wrote the music for, because when he watched it, if he were to watch it, all he would hear is the things that he didn't do or that he could have done better. He won't appreciate it for what it is. And I certainly know painters and authors who are the same way, where it's, you're the tortured author and you get to the point where you've got to deliver your book to your publisher, and it is what it is. Yeah. You just have to walk away from it. So for me, watching other people's stuff, it's, I guess, a little easier because I don't have that type of a critical eye, so I'm able to enjoy it a little bit more. I think it's harder watching your own work, at least it is for me, because you always see the things that you would have done differently or you wished you had had one more day on. So, I don't know that I could watch someone else's film and say, oh, they did that well or they didn't. I know what moves me. I know what I respond to. So I guess that's really what stays with me more than anything, is how it made me feel. And that's true for the music as well. There's a line that Steven Spielberg had about John Williams, who composed the music for so many of those iconic Spielberg films, where he said, as a director, I can bring a tear to someone's eye, but it's John's music that makes it fall. And that's just such a great line about the power of music and how in the visual arts, as you had made the point earlier, Chris, I mean, it's what the writer wrote, and it's what the director envisioned, and it's what the production designer created, and it's what the actor delivered, and it's what the editor cut together, and it's what the composer put underneath it all. And collectively, all those things can bring an audience into a moment and make them feel a certain emotion. And that's just such a powerful thing to be able to manipulate an audience in that way. I mean, I love being in a theater where you hear people laugh or when you're seeing people cry. And it's because that's what was intended by the writer, the director, the composer, all these other elements. I mean, that's just a really powerful thing, which is what I love about the visual arts. Those type of scoring setups, I think, is one of the reasons Crash won Film of the Year when it did, because they were so good at pulling your emotion on the parts you were supposed to feel something through scoring and through editing in post in particular. $1 million question here, Mark. This is the one everybody's waiting for, and I think you probably get a sense of what everybody wants to know in this audience. What advice do you have for independent filmmakers about getting funding for their projects? What are some keys around financing? That's always the challenge, I think, for anyone in independent film is, financing and distribution. How do you get your film funded, and how do you get your film seen? And I think there's a lot of ways to go. I mean, that's the other great thing about the era and the industry today, is that there's more choices now than ever. There's more paths forward for filmmakers than ever. I think it was a lot harder 10 years, 20 years ago for an independent filmmaker to really stand out or make noise or get a film off the ground or get it seen. And now there's so many channels and so many platforms and so many methods by which audiences are consuming content, and such a demand for new content, and interest in being part of that. So, I know people that have raised funds through grants or through co-productions. I know people that have raised funds through crowdfunding, just with their family and friends to get the money together to go tell the story. And then there's the more traditional ways of debt financing and tax credits and equity investment and all those other elements. I tend to approach funding as thirds. Ideally, if I'm going to make, let's for easy math, say a $3 million film, I'd maybe try to raise a third in equity, and then I'd try to have a third as a tax credit from whatever location where we're filming, and then have a third that could be against pre-sales of the film. So you could make a $3 million film, but you don't need to raise $3 million. You only need to raise $1 million to make that $3 million film. So that's kind of where I start. The math doesn't always work up quite as neatly as that, but I always try to approach things from that perspective. What could I do where I could make this film with a third of what it would take, in terms of the burden on equity to go be raised. And then it's trying to find the people that will support you on that. And I've been very fortunate to have found people who have been willing to join me on the journeys that I've been on to tell the stories that Rolling Pictures has been telling. And it's hopefully fun and hopefully profitable and rewarding at the end of the day. But that's definitely a challenge, and there is no right answer, I don't think. So
yeah, I do like your rule of thirds though. That's pretty good. I think that's a great place to start. And I have talked to a lot of independent filmmakers that refuse to use leverage. And one thing I would tell to everybody listening, and I've told to those filmmakers, is the entire world is leverage. Like you just spent 30 minutes to an hour telling me how much you believed in your film, but you're not willing to take leverage or debt rather to make your film. So I don't believe you now.
Yeah. Also, the most expensive money is equity. And if you're going to make a $10 million film and you had to go raise $10 million in equity, that's also the riskiest money. So, it's just, It doesn't make sense. If you could make a $10 million film with only $3 million, risk in equity, and then you've got another $3 million coming from a tax credit. Well, the tax credit offsets the risk of your equity investors, right there. And there's ways you could mitigate risk and try to leverage things through the debt financing or other financing there, where to just raise $10 million and roll the dice and hope that the film makes it back, to me just seems like an unnecessary risk. So that's the other thing that I always try to be mindful of is, doing things that are within a budget and have a reasonable chance of success. I never want to get to a situation where someone who believed in me and believed in my story isn't happy at the end of the day. So that's always my goal. You never know if a film's going to make tons of money. You always hope that they do, but you never know. But, my goal is really that no one loses money on a film and everyone comes out happy that they were part of it at the end of the day. And anything beyond that is just, icing on the cake. But, it's a challenge. The other thing I'll say is that it oftentimes doesn't take as much money as you might think to do really amazing things. I met a filmmaker who had made a short film that ended up in the Cannes Film Festival. It's a 13-minute space epic that was just beautifully done and visually stunning, and it looks like it's $1 million film, and he made it with a green screen in his apartment with his friends for less than $100, and it got into the Cannes Film Festival. It's just, he's a brilliant visual effects and motion graphics guy. So he had that going for him. He could do a lot of that himself, but he created this virtual world in this environment and had a very creative approach to creating this, outer space type of feel where, it was believable and it was emotional and impactful, and yet was ultra low budget. It was just, I was floored at what he was able to accomplish with such little financial resources, just through sheer talent and goodwill with friends who helped them. So, and there are so many stories like that of people that are really telling very powerful films on relatively small or micro budgets. So, Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, I think a lot of people think you've got to have $10 million to go make a film, and you don't. A lot of the films I do are, under six. There are films that won Academy Awards in the last several years that were made for $5 million.
Yeah. Three Billboards, Nomadland come to mind. And we have a saying, because I do think you do need to being talented helps. I'll say that, Mark. And it's like, the more talented you are, the more you can get away with. And I don't mean that in a cynical way, because I'm not a cynic. What I mean is like one guy I point to all the time is Maxey. He's an auteur who really should be making more feature work, but he's made a feature film and a ton of shorts, and his shorts always win awards. He made it to Cannes with one of them as well. And he doesn't pay anything for his short films because everybody wants to work with him because he's so damn good and they know it. They basically want to jump on his kite string. That's what it comes down to. And if your kite string isn't floating very high, you'll find out you have to pay top dollar for everything. And if people feel like you're an ascending entity and they want to be part of your story, all of a sudden, all these things are free. And, he made a great short film called Everyday Yeti that won a ton of awards. He paid $0 for it. Everybody just wanted to do it. So I think being talented helps. Mark, you've been so great with your time, so amazing. I've learned so much. I know the audience has too. I want to just quickly turn back to you as an individual, or turn to you as an individual. I don't think we've zoned in on you yet. Just some things that you're involved in and that sort of orbit around you. And so I want to start with just you personally. What two pieces of advice have you received in your career that stay with you? Like, what are those two best pieces of advice you've received that you think about maybe every day, and who did they come from?
Yeah. So, one of my first jobs, relevant to this industry, I was working for a guy who, and again, I'm a bit older, so he had used the term Rolodex, your address book, but he had made the point that his most valuable asset, at least in business, was his Rolodex. It was the people he knew and the relationships he had built. And, I was young and just starting out on my journey. And so I'm not sure that, and I think now networking is a much bigger thing. I mean, this is before the internet, before the World Wide Web. There was no LinkedIn, there was no Facebook, there's no Instagram. I think now we're much more aware of the power of networking and social networks and who you know. But back then, that did not exist, and so that was a lesson that stuck with me, and I always remembered. And so I've always tried to remember people and connect with people, find points of common with people, and build those relationships. Because the assistant you meet today or the production assistant you're working with tomorrow may be 5 years from now the executive who's making the decision about whether to acquire your film or fund your film or give you a green light. So just build those relationships and be decent to people and deliver on your promises. The other advice that someone gave me that I've always tried to impart to my kids is follow the fun. If you love what you do, if you're having a good time, it's not work. I can't wait to get up in the morning and get to work, because it's not work for me. It's fun. And, there's been times in the edit suite where it's been midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning where the editor and I look at each other and think, well, we have to go home, but we can't wait till Monday morning when we can come back and get started again, because we're just having so much fun. And then, there are other people that have jobs or careers where they don't feel that way, and they can't wait to get home, and they're counting down to 5 o'clock when they can punch out and get out of there. And, so my advice is always follow the fun, because if you're having fun, then you love what you do, and it'll always be fun. It's not work. And I've tried to live by that. And a lot of the decisions I've made, for better or for worse, it doesn't always lead to good choices. Not every decision I've made has been probably the best decision with the benefit of some hindsight, but it's always been in the spirit of, following the fun and trying to move forward. So
that's brilliant. That is brilliant. I love it. How did you find your mentors?
I don't know. I think there's just a matter of of good fortune and luck, I guess. I moved to Virginia from the Midwest to work for an interactive television company, which is where I had met the mentor I mentioned who gave me the advice on the power of networking. He just happened to be the vice president that I reported to, and kind of took me under his wing. And, we stayed friends long after that company was gone and long after he had retired. We'd still get together, once or twice a year just for lunch or coffee. He had a huge impact on me and, that early stage of my career. And, I think if I look back at my life, there's been people like that, whether it's a teacher or a scout leader or a friend or a peer or a manager who have provided something that even if I didn't realize it at the time, looking back on it, I ended up realizing was a pretty important step or pivotal, realization or piece of information that helped me advance in my career and, kind of get where I got. And I guess that's the other thing is always just being open. If you're passionate about something and you love what you do, you tend to talk to people about it. And whether it's someone you're seated next to on an airplane or on a train, my first television special, which I think I mentioned was a primetime PBS broadcast on Christmas Eve with Marvin Hamlish and the National Symphony performing at the Kennedy Center doing a concert for the troops. And that came about because I was seated next to a guy on the train back from New York to DC, and we got to talking and we ended up getting along and had similar interests. Didn't know who he was. It turns out it was Marvin Hamlish. And by the time we got to DC, we were talking about what could we do together. And at the time I was doing a lot of volunteering for the USO and the troops. And so we came up with this idea of, pitching PBS and him doing a concert with the National Symphony for the troops on Christmas Eve. And, that was just talking about what we do and being open to the people around you and present and listening and engaging. And, I don't know, I just think that's been really helpful as well. It's just being open to the possibilities.
I love that. I'm reminded of the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey. And even though that movie has some twists and turns and shows the perils of saying yes to everything, I'll walk around like that all the time. Like, I want to know how we can work together. And in your words, how do we follow the fun together? And I don't want to walk around in life with, as an ivory tower guy, like, well, you got to earn your right to talk to me or I'm not going to share anything personal with you. I really am deeply against distrust of your fellow man or neighbor. I'm deeply against it, regardless of what the news says. I have a journalism degree. What people don't realize is that a journalist's job is to show you the extraordinary. And so in ordinary life, people are nice. They're positive. They want to help you. So just, be open. What are the biggest creative and business mistakes you see newcomers making?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just in what they select to focus on. I mean, you see a lot of people putting a lot of time into things that really have no future. It's just a bad script or a bad story or a bad idea. So I think being able to have an objective view of things is one thing. In terms of filmmaking, I know that for a lot of emerging filmmakers who are just getting started, and I see this a lot with a lot of the student films or first-time films that come in to some of the film festivals I'm involved with. People are so focused on the visual, on getting it framed and lit and what's happening in front of the camera and the actors, and they're so focused on that they don't think about sound. And then they've got bad audio. You've got a camera mic that sounds like it's far away and you can hardly hear. It's very, unbalanced or unequal audio. And, one of the things that I'll share with, emerging filmmakers is that, audio is so important. If something is out of focus or not perfectly lit or not perfectly framed, it could be a stylistic choice and it's kind of avant-garde. And the audience will be more forgiving of that. But if it's got bad audio, it's just a bad film. No audience wants to suffer through bad audio. And so I think paying attention to all aspects of production, not just what you see through the lens, is a mistake that a lot of first-time filmmakers tend to make that they could avoid. So pay attention to audio. It's so important. Also, production design. I'm not sure I fully appreciated the role of a production designer until I got into your films. All the documentary stuff and unscripted stuff I did, that was less of an issue in those productions. And when I got into features, I came to really respect and appreciate just the importance of the production designer in the creative process. And it really is a collaboration between them and the director and the writer and producer and other creatives. But production design is huge.
Completely agree.
Yeah, stuff doesn't happen by accident. And so, it's, I don't know if that answered your question, Chris, but I mean, those are creative mistakes for sure. Is there a business mistake that you see newcomers making? I don't know. I think, and maybe I think this industry has a lot of people to talk, and there's just a lot of people that do a lot of talking and maybe don't spend as much time or effort on delivering. And that's one of the things that I found. I've looked back on business conversations with people where I would spend, we'd sit through a meeting or multiple meetings or multiple calls, and I think about how many hours did I spend talking with this person about this project or this opportunity, only later to realize that, it's just smoke and mirrors and they're not real. And this has no legs and they have no future. It's just someone that likes to talk. Yeah. And so I think, say what you mean and mean what you say and follow through on what you said, I think is good advice, regardless of what your career is, but certainly in a creative, collaborative thing like filmmaking, do what you say and deliver on it. And I think that's how you build trust, and that's how things get made, and that's how you'll succeed. And man, there's a lot of people that just love to talk and never produce, they never deliver, they never follow through, and nothing ever comes of it. And I don't know how they sustain themselves or how they sleep at night, but I scratch my head and wonder, what did I just sit through and why? And those aren't the people that I tend to surround myself with. The people that knock it out of the park and give it 110% and follow through on what they say and, under promise and over deliver. Those are the people that I tend to gravitate towards. And those are the people I try to emulate with the way I handle my own business dealings. So I definitely try to set the bar low and over deliver. Yeah,
100% agree with that. I want to give you a fun hypothetical. You have some poor producer who has put themselves in a bind. They've come to you basically hat in hand, Mark, and they have 1 month before principal photography and they're new to production. They've done nothing. All right. And they need to learn how to be a producer. What are the first 3 things you teach them to get them ready for principal photography?
I mean, if films are made in prep, I mean, there's a saying for a reason. If you're a month out from principal photography and you haven't done any prep, then I don't think you're making a film. I mean, that's the first thing. It's one thing if you're trying to throw things together for a commercial shoot or something or something else. But if you're talking about a feature film,
maybe I should adjust it for you, Mark. 1 month before pre-pro.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what advice would I give? I don't know. I mean, again, it's
what would be the first 3 things you teach them to do? So they've never done this before. They need to learn from you. They've come to the school of Mark Maxey. What's 1, 2, 3?
I tell them to find a better school. First of all, I don't know that I'm the one with all the answers. I definitely build the right team, right? I mean, it is a collaborative medium, and so if you're planning, if you're a month out from pre-production and you're putting the pieces together, get the right people and set realistic expectations and have a realistic budget for those things. I think a lot of people end up upside down on projects because they had unrealistic expectations, or maybe they they didn't, but they didn't set realistic expectations with others. And I think oftentimes they don't have realistic budgets for what it is they're trying to do. Or they don't have the right people. So, I mean, I think those are the three most important factors: is, having the right people, having the right budget, and setting the right expectations. Because even if you're off in the budget, if you've got the right people and the properly set expectations, you can overcome that. Yeah. Or if you have the right budget, has set the right expectations, but have the wrong people, that's a problem you could solve if you had to. You could work around those, but if you don't have the right people, you don't have the right budget, and you haven't set the right expectations, I think it's hard to be successful. So I think those are three key factors.
Beautifully put. It reminds me of Neil Gaiman's rule of 2/3. Could be great at two things and good or average at the third, and people will accept that. But you got to have at least 2/3. What's next for Mark Maxey?
Well, I mean, we've got a bunch of films that are in development or production, and I mean, that's what I'm excited about. Next week, I'm doing a project with Shaquille O'Neal. I'm excited about that, and then we have a film that we're prepping that's being directed by. I've been part of As They Made Us, as we talked about, with Dustin Hoffman, and now I'm working with his son Jake Hoffman, who's written a script called The Problem with Poets. That's just a very charming, sweet kind of coming of age romantic comedy set in New York, kind of story. And so we are prepping for that. We've got a brilliant cast that's attached and a fantastic crew, and we're scouting locations and putting that together now to do in the spring. So, and then we've got these other projects in development, some of which I've mentioned earlier, that I look forward to being able to share more about as they come to fruition and kind of firm up. So, I'm always excited about what's next. So. For me, that's what makes every day fun and challenging is whatever the next project is. So,
yeah, I cannot wait. I'm really looking forward to everything that you do in the coming 12 to 24 months. You are you're a real pro's pro, and I really have to thank Tamara Trexler for. Shout out to her for introducing me to you last year. And I've learned so much from you without even having legitimately worked with you outside of this podcast before. So I think the future is so interesting and fun, as you put it, for not just yourself, but hopefully what we can do together in the future. And when you're ready, you can always come back, do a round two in this podcast, promote some of your films that are out there, and let this audience know what you're up to. In the meantime, can you tell everybody where they can find you on the internet, on social media, maybe even see some of your movies or some of your work?
Sure. Rollingpictures.com is the website for the company, so that's probably the easiest place to start. Go to rollingpictures.com, and you should have some stuff there about the films. I've got a page at maxeymedia.com. That's kind of my personal page, but there's really not much there. So, Rolling Pictures is a place to be. I'm on LinkedIn. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm on IMDb. I'm out there. I'm accessible. I'm not Spielberg, so I'm just a working guy who's, every day getting up and doing what I love, and trying to have a positive impact on the world as I'm doing it. So anyway, always happy to connect with people. And Chris, grateful for your time, and Nick and the work that you guys do at Bonsai, I think is amazing. And it's been a pleasure, being part of your podcast today. So thank you very much. Hear.
And we will end on this. Have to tell you happy anniversary. You have now been married for 24 years. Is that right?
24 years. Yeah. 24 years ago yesterday. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, relationships always come up on this podcast. It's a thing that's touch and go, difficult to be in, creative and stay together. What's your secret? What can you tell this audience in terms of advice or things to remember about how to stay married and be in the film business?
I don't know. I'm married up. I think I got the better end of the deal. And my wife has just been a huge, source of joy and inspiration. And I couldn't be doing what I'm doing and wouldn't be, what I'm doing and wouldn't have the family that I have if it weren't for her. So she's fantastic. So, and I think a lot of the relationship advice is the same as some of the other advice. Do what you say what you mean. Follow through. Be open to the possibilities and follow the fun. And if you're doing those things in a relationship as well as in your career, hopefully you'll find the same happiness that I've been fortunate enough to find. So.
All right. I absolutely think that is the case, and it's true. It's really just comes back to what we've been saying throughout, and it might be the theme of the entire conversation, which is people want to jump on a moving train, or I guess I said earlier, a floating kite. And if they think it's real, they'll stick with you, and you'll stick with them, and you have your sort of own thing, and you're keeping it legit. And the reason you keep it legit, and the reason you're able to do what you say and say what you mean, is because you really love it. So of course you're doing what you don't have an ulterior motive. You're not pretending to love doing movies so that you can be famous. You're doing it because you love to do it. And I think the same thing is true in relationships. So I wish you and Becky another 24 years and or longer. And I think that's incredible. My parents were married for 35 years before my mom died. And so the power of staying together is not talked about a lot today, but it is so meaningful. So I was really happy to know that I was interviewing you a day after your anniversary. So Mark, this has been an absolute blast. I know we're going to stay in touch, and have a great day. Looking forward to round 2.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Anytime, man. Be good. Peace. Hey gang, one more thing before you go. I want to talk to you about Indie Insights. Indie Insights is our bi-weekly newsletter and love note to the film industry, movies, and the creatives that make them, not to mention you, our esteemed listeners. Inside, you'll find curated industry trends, articles, exclusive commentary, and underappreciated films from filmmakers like you worldwide. And the best part is that it's completely free. So, join today at www.bonsai.film. It just takes a few seconds, and once you sign up, you'll get the very next newsletter. It's that simple. Go to www.bonsai.film to get Indie Insights, our bi-weekly newsletter, and join a network of film creatives like yourself. And don't worry, we'll never sell your information or spam you with a bunch of nonsense emails, just the bi-weekly film industry goodness you need. And if you ever tire of Indie Insights, we hope not, but if you do, simply unsubscribe. No gimmicks, no games. So, one more time, go to www.bonsai.film to get Indie Insights for free. And thank you for listening.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
These days, everything in ATL costs more. But somehow, Verizon costs less, as low as $50 for a single line when you switch. So while coffee is definitely costing more, Verizon costs less. And dinner in Buckhead for 2 has gotten pricey. Verizon, less pricey. Inman Park rent, that's not coming down anytime soon. But Verizon, down. Just $50 a line. Limited edition sneakers, through the roof. Verizon prices, through the floor. That designer golden doodle, so much more. A single line on Verizon, a fair bit less. Even a good old tried and true hamburger will cost you more. But with Verizon, the same good old tried and true service now costs you less. Point is, in a world that is always costing more, you can get more for less right now at an Atlanta Verizon store. $180 BYOD and $360 local promo credits applied over 36 months. For new customers with one line and your own 4G or 5G phone on unlimited welcome plan required. Additional terms apply. Auto pay and paper-free billing required. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G and 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds.